Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Sibyl, the host and producer of the Sibyl podcast. For this week's episode, it is a collaboration with some incredible voices in the podcasting world. So special shout out to Dr. Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts of my Black is Translational podcast, Miss Mulemwa Siisii, my Zambian princess, whose podcast is called Concrete Pastures. And last but definitely not the least, our Mitrak, our powerful force, Miss Kemi Seriki. If you're familiar with the podcast, her name should be familiar. Her podcast is called Pansa Forum Podcast. Together, we put up a panel that delved into the world of immigrant fatherhood. We focused on the experiences of fathers from traditional African backgrounds, and our panelists included Mr. Babatunde Fakpohunda, Mr. Stephen Batty of the Sambasa podcast, Mr. Kenny Pokwola, who's one of our beloved patrons, and last but not the least, Dr. Taiwa Dedikpe, aka our very own T-Dog, and Mr. Sami Desu. In this episode, they all shared their experiences and insights and stories about the joys of fatherhood, the challenges, and the cultural intricacies. They also talked about their cherished childhood memories to adapting roles in new countries. And this episode also offers a journey of empathy and understanding for everyone, regardless of their connection to fatherhood. And T-Dog shared his experience with adoption as well. So get ready to be inspired and enlightened as we explore the unique journey of immigrant fathers. I'd like to give a special thank you to my co-hosts for making this panel possible. In any event, enjoy the show and don't forget to check out their platforms as well. Thank you. Now enjoy the show. Again.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the African Dad mini-series. DAD stands for Discussions Among Diasporans. This is an event that is focused on fatherhood, Black manhood across for African immigrant men from all across the diaspora. My name is Dr. Kelechi Ibe-Lamberts. I am the host of the My Black is Transnational podcast, and I'd like to thank my fellow collaborators, the Pansa podcast, also Concrete Pastures podcast, and the More Sibyl podcast for coming and putting this important conversation, much needed conversation for me, being in public health, also acknowledging the fact that this is Men's Health Month. So being able to have this conversation, talking about fatherhood, talking about health, talking about the immigrant experience is crucial, much needed, and hopefully can be continued in our respective communities. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our facilitator for this conversation. This is Kemi Seriki, who I affectionately call my Auntie Kemi. She is the host of the Pansa podcast, but also the author behind the Pansa Forum, which is a website that I encourage you all to check out. And we will also be sharing, Mo, I know I messed up and I didn't send this thing to you, but forgive me. But I will also be sharing our information for our respective platforms so that you all can be able to check it out for future references. But Auntie Kemi, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for facilitating.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, everyone. Good morning for joining this important forum discussion. My name again is Kemi Seriki. I'm the host of Pansa Forum. And on the podcast, we actually discuss experiences and the challenges African immigrant community and intergenerational issue within the family. So this actually conversation falls into the purpose of Pansa Forum. And I'm so happy since I've met Kelechi, the first one in this group. He has been like a family. So is Nancy Mulemwa Siisii, as well as my dear Mo Sibyl as well. So we've been working with this together, and thank you so much for all the effort and everything you put in. So I would like to welcome everyone to this community conversation on fatherhood within African immigrant community. Since our last community conversation, which was held last year about African immigrant experiences and intergenerational relationship, I've always wanted to hold a community conversation on the role of fatherhood within our community, because most of the time we talk about mothers, but we don't really talk about the fathers. even though there are diversity of many family composition in the diaspora, within our community, there are single fathers, home in which, fathers are the only one raising the children. And then there's also single mother like me, which I raised 2 of my children by myself with the whole community of the village that I built up for myself. All these situations also occur for a variety of reasons. Why we have single parents, we have, both parents in the household or whatever we want to talk about. So then the question is, how has migration impacted the role of fatherhood in our community in the diaspora, whether you are in America or Canada or in Europe? So as an African father living in the diaspora, how has migration forced the changes or modified the role of fathers in division of household responsibilities? Okay, and also involvement in children's lives, such as the area in terms of childcare, and so many other things, educational responsibility. So to say that, I just want to say tomorrow is Father's Day, and we're all going to celebrate Father's Day. And what a great day to have this conversation a day before Father's Day in advance. So, and I'm also going to quote President Obama that says about fatherhood. President Obama said, every man is trying to live up to his father's expectation and to make up for their father's mistake. So we are not all perfect as a parents. Our parents were not perfect as a parents. And our children, when they become parents, they won't be perfect either. So that's how we have to see it. So with that being said today, I believe we have about 5, maybe 6 now panelists, who are going to contribute, because I saw Mr. Sami Disu also that I contacted yesterday and is willing to also join us. He's a young father, living in New York City. So I would like to ask each one of our volunteers to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about your background to our audience as to where you presently reside, and the reason for accepting this invitation for this forum. So who is going to go first? I'll call Mr. Papunda as the elder.
Thank you very much. Where do I start? Okay. My name is Babatunde Fakunda, as you can see on the screen. I don't know if I can say I'm the oldest there. You can tell I'm the only one with, but I came to the United States almost 43 years ago to go to graduate school. And my background, I'm an engineer. My father was a pastor at the Anglican church. So I grew up literally in the church. So, but I came here almost 43 years ago with the hope of getting a graduate degree and going back to Nigeria. But here I am, 43 years later, I'm still in the United States. I have, why am I here? Well, my wife gave me an ultimatum that I have to do it. And after 39 years of marriage, you got to, you got to listen, and you got to compromise, and you got to do things to support your wife. And that's one thing I want to emphasize for the men here. You have to find a way to support your wife in whatever they do. My wife has been participating in this program, and I think I joined maybe last year. I think I joined briefly. So since I got the invitation, I marked my calendar. I usually play soccer on Saturdays, but I said this Saturday, and fortunately the season is over, so I have no excuse. Well, I have a son and a daughter. My son is going to be 39 years old in September. And my daughter, I'm not gonna tell you how old she is, but she's younger. Okay, so and we have moved a little bit in the last since they were born 39 years ago. We lived in the UK for some time. They are British, and also Americans. So you can tell the kind of environments we lived in, in the UK, in the United States. They haven't lived in Nigeria, but I have, and my wife has also lived in Nigeria. So you can imagine the cultural challenges that we have to go through in raising these two, in raising my children. Yeah, I still call them children. In two different cultures.
Thank you
so I'm going to stop, because when I get going, I can't stop. I got a lot to say, but let me stop right there and then give the next guy the opportunity to introduce himself.
Thank you so much for that. That's such a gracious introduction. So, Mr. Stephen, you want to go? Who wants to go next?
You want me to go as Sambaza?
Yes, Sambaza. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sambaza Podcast, and I got the invitation from Nancy Mulemwa, and she asked me to join in, and I was like, oh, well, let me join in and see what we got going on. I see the panel here. Looks like we're going to have a good conversation. Now, I'm from Kenya, which is in East Africa. I've been living in the United States, as I said before. For those who missed, I'll be like 21 years being in America on June 21st. That's next week. And married for 15 years, have two kids, 13-year-old and 11-year-old. 13-year-old is a boy, 11-year-old is a girl. They're currently swimming right now. I couldn't attend, so that's why I'm here. But I'm stoked to be here. I immigrated here from what you've gathered, and my kids are actually, let me put it this way, as my wife says, they're truly African American, because I'm African, my wife is American, so we have kids who are, like, say, African American. So that's the nucleus of our family, and that's the basis of where we can start our conversation at. And I'm happy to be around knowledgeable people today. And happy Father's Day to the fathers and mothers out there.
Thank you so much. So who wants to go next? Mr. Taiwo or Mr. Sobua, you want to go?
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Taiwo Adeipe, and just like the first speaker, I'm here to support my wife too. But anyway, I've been married 12 years. Married 12 years. We have a 4-year-old daughter. And being in the U.S. about 12 years too, immigrated here, in 2011 as well. We currently live in Oklahoma. What else am I missing out? And I'm really glad to be here to learn a little bit about people's experiences and to share my unique experiences as a father as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. What else do we have?
I can go next.
Yes.
Yep. So hello everyone. Hope everyone is having a good weekend. My name is Kenny Pokwala. I'm a dad of two, an 8-year-old girl and a 3.5-year-old son. I live across the pond in the UK with my wife. I've been living in the UK now for like 12 years, originally from Nigeria. I've been on the Sibyl podcast a couple of times to share about my fatherhood journey, because it's quite a unique journey as well. And I'm glad to be here to share my experiences as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Mr. Sami Disu, you want to go?
Yes, greetings everybody. This is Sami Disu speaking to you actually from Accra, Ghana. I hope the internet connection is stable. Sometimes it's an issue. I typically live in New York City. Have been living in New York City for about 18 years, which means I've lived in New York more than anywhere else, including Ghana, which is where I'm originally from. Back in the US, I've had several work experiences. I have a communications background. I also teach at City University of New York in the Africana department. I also have an activist background, pretty active in the New York State area. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Oh, I also have a 5-year-old daughter called Zuri Ya Disu. Yes, I'll be drawing from some of my experiences being a dad in the United States and sharing with you. Thank you.
So why did you accept the invitation today?
Well, last minute, yesterday, Miss Seriki invited me to be a part of this discussion. And how can I say no to Miss Seriki, who's very active in our communities here in New York and here for anybody and everybody as and when we need her. So really, it's responding to the call. But being with Africans and the Black immigrant community and engaged in these affairs, this is my cup of tea to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as the saying goes, our roots is what makes us to be who we are today. For each one of the men on this panel, what was your childhood favorable memory? Please briefly tell our audience, what was it that you missed mostly from your home country?
Well, going by, since I'm next to you, I think I enjoy the beach. We live by the beach, and that's what I miss the most. And when I go back, I always want to travel right back to where I was. I grew up, and spend some time watching, just hanging around near the sea. It's very relaxing, quiet, and I think those are one of the best childhood memories I've ever had, and till to date.
So what about you, Mr. Kenny? Anybody else wants to share?
Yes, growing up in Lagos, I miss that communal living. We used to live in like blocks of flats, and growing up, coming back from school, everybody would rush off to do their homework and then gather downstairs. And then juxtaposing that with like living in the UK, it's quite different. It feels a bit isolated. So everybody is just in their houses, and the only time kids get to interact is either during school period or like if there's an outing. So yeah, I definitely miss that. With my kids, I try to give them the opportunity to get out a bit more as opposed to just staying indoors, which is quite popular around here.
Yeah, thank you. So Mr. Faponda or anybody else have?
Yeah, I can take that. It's a little difficult for me to say what I miss most, and I'll tell you why. Because I've been out of the country for too long. Yeah, so if you had asked me the question maybe 40 years ago, my answer would probably be different from what I'll give you now. So, but the the thing that I miss most is family. You know, I have 4 siblings, and I had 27 nephews and nieces. And right now, maybe up to 50 grandnephews and nieces. And because I don't have the opportunity anymore to at least spend some time with some of them and get to know them, and because I told you my father was a pastor, and we lived in a vicarage, which used to be, for those of you who are Anglican, the vicarage was everybody's home. You know, people come and family will come and stay without notice. You see what I'm saying? So, and for every family member that came, you could see the uniqueness. And they tell you stories, the stories that you can't hear from either your mother or your father because they're too busy. The uncles will tell you, your aunts will tell you, and some of them, some cousins, they claim they are cousins. You don't even know the relationship. You don't have to know because your parents tell you, that's your cousin, that's your uncle, you know. Mm-hmm. So the wisdom that they transfer, knowingly or unknowingly, it didn't resonate with you until maybe years later. Mm-hmm. And so that is, to me, is what I miss most about growing up in Nigeria.
And that is so powerful, what you just said, because I could relate to the same thing. Being in America now for a little bit over 40 years too. You know, you've been away from that society for so long, you don't really know what you missed. But then in terms of, you know, there's a strong family background, strong connection with the neighbors, with everybody around you who will take up for you for whatever it is, you know, no child left behind. It takes a village to raise a child. That's where that saying comes into play. So thank you so much for that. So Mr. Taiwo or Mr. Disu, you have anything to contribute to that?
I'll go. So I miss 2 things, you know, growing up with my father and my twin brother, taking trips to our farm in Otta then, you know, and harvesting crops, you know, roasting things on the farm, you know, stopping by to have some palm wine on the way home. You know, I miss that. I miss that experience. And then the other thing I miss is, you know, that sense of community. We try to create that here, you know, with the Nigerian community we have. You know, I know usually around Christmas and things like that, when we have events, we have, you know, my siblings and my parents, everybody comes home and just have a good time together, and over dinner and all that, you know, dancing and just having a good time together. I miss that. You know, it's hard to replicate that here, but we try, you know, among our Nigerian community here in Oklahoma City. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Mr. Disu, you have anything?
Yes. So my family traveled a lot when I was younger. So maybe from 10 to 20 years of age is when I could draw some of these good times that I can actually remember. And that was in Kuwait, which is in the Middle East. My dad was working there as a journalist. And when I was 10 years old, I and my siblings were able to join my dad along with my mom in Kuwait. And we had some great times, just the nucleus of that family. My parents would later divorce. It was even not a very pleasant one by my recollection. But I remember, yes, the earliest times that we were in Kuwait, when things were good between them and when we were all together, just wonderful times, everyone in good health. That's what I can draw on for great memories.
Thank you so much for that. So I want to ask you, going into much more deep into conversation, what was your view or concept of fatherhood when you were growing up in your respective countries? What was your view of fatherhood? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll take that.
Okay.
My father and mother got married in 1942, and my father died a few months before I came to the United States. So, and I came in 1980. So my mother was widowed in 1980. And my mother died in January 2021 at the age of 116 days. So she was widowed for 40 years, at least. And like I said, my dad was a pastor. And so I watched him, the role he played. He was the head of the family. And he lived his life as the head of the family. Being the head of the family doesn't mean you have to be rich, doesn't mean you have to be able to provide everything. But you have that the Yoruba adage says, ibita pelori kifitele. What it means is the head has to remain the head. You can't walk on your head, okay? If you start walking on your head, I'm trying to try to translate. So the role of the father, as far as I'm concerned, is the head of the family. And what does that mean? You have to provide for the family. You have to support the family. You have to laugh with the family. You have to weep with the family, because you don't have a full day if you don't cry. Something emotional has to hit you on a daily basis, and you cry. And then if you find something that makes you happy, you laugh. When you do that, your day is complete. Don't lie to yourself, okay? Every day is not going to be, a basket of cherries. There are days that are good, some are bad. But as a father, as the head of the family, you have to be ready for that. You have to be able to deal with that. Because, and I'm telling you now from experience, if you have a male child or a male or a female child, they're watching. They're watching how you react, how you behave when the chips are down, and they look up to you. So if you fold and forget about your role as the head of the family, you are failing your family as a father.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. So who wants to go next? Mr. Kemi or Mr.
Yes, I'll go next. If I look at it on my perspective, in our community, the dad was the head of the family, and I think my dad and mom, God rest their souls, they stayed married for a long time, and they had this thing where it was peculiar. They never kept secrets from each other. So whatever I might go to say a secret to my mom and think that it'll not get to my dad, somehow it'll get to my dad and my dad would tell me. So I realized at one point, look, you're not hiding anything from each other. Whoever you're going to talk to is going to tell the other person the whole story. So might as well just pick and choose whichever time is convenient and explain to it. Now, does that happen right now in my family, in my current family? Yes. Now, these are some of the values that you pick on. And The other things I can say is, which is weird in the African setting where the man, and I'm sorry, I'm going to put this out there, the man does not get into the kitchen and cook. For me, fortunately, I'll speak for myself. I have gotten into the kitchen maybe about 5-10 times to cook. I think even more than between 5 and 10 times in our 15 years of marriage, because of the way my wife is. Contrary to what people will think about African American women, my wife cooks, and she accords me the opportunity to do other things. Not that I don't have my role, but there's a role that I play as a man, and I have to fulfill that. But she takes care of the kitchen part, and I do the grilling. She cannot grill, so grilling is my part, and that's where we kind of have those roles. And these roles were passed on from my father and to me, and this is what I watched my father, and this is what she watched her mom go through those type of roles. So I think somehow I always say I'm the unicorn because we mesh in terms of our family setting, and it's worked out fine for us, contrary to some other people who would have a different perspective when it comes to cooking, especially in America where roles are shared. Now, when it comes to other things like taking care of the baby, like carrying the baby, walking around with the baby, moving around with the baby, those are things that I had to learn. I remember the first time my mom seeing me change a diaper, she actually was amazed that I could change the diaper. And I looked at her and I said, well, you have to do these things because this is what is expected of you. So those are some slight roles that have changed, even though my dad had those traditional roles where, he only carried the child when the child was cleaned up, ready. When they needed to go do their thing, she passed it on to a maid, which we don't have here. So bottom line is roles do change when you leave Africa, the African setting, you come to America. And again, I say I got the unicorn where I got to pass, I got to escape some of those roles a little bit on the cooking part. Even though I'm a good cook, I must say, I'm going to tell you that I can cook.
Thank you so much for that. It lots you covered, as well as Mr. Papu that also covered so many grounds on that. So, Mr. Kenny, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what Mr. Fakwanda and Sambasa said. It's all about mirroring. I was fortunate enough to meet both my paternal grandparents, so my granddad from both sides. And it was just a case of they luckily set good examples. I saw the way they treated my grandmothers. I saw the way they treated my parents. And it was only natural because what I realized is kids will do what they see, not exactly what you tell them. So it's just about that conscious effort to make sure you're sending the right messages. Even though we encourage you to say things to them, they will still mirror what you do, all the acts you do. So it was things like their work ethics, how they always go out each day, make a living for the family, come back home, support their spouses, things like that, things that I picked up from an early age to say, okay, once you get married, you have to put your hands to the wheel and get stuff done. Support your wife as well, be hands-on with the kids as well, and just make it easier. So for me, it's just about mirroring, looking at those examples and picking up the right things from those who have come before us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Adedipe.
Yes, roles of a father, I guess, growing up, I saw my dad also as a provider. He did his best while he was here to be the provider. I remember times when we'll go meet him and, he taught me, I guess one big thing I learned from him was learning to live within your means and to budget, just not trying to get overboard on things, So that was a really big one I learned. I didn't learn this one specifically from my dad, but my son and my twin were the last born, so we're the ones mostly at home with my dad and mom when everyone else was gone. And I quickly learned that we had to help with cleaning the house, and cooking sometimes, doing the dishes. So those didn't come unnatural. When I got married, that's it was easy to support my wife, in keeping the house, so yeah. So in terms of the roles of a father, I think, number one is provider, and also supporting your child and your wife. So, yeah.
Mr. Disu?
Yes, I just echoing a number of the speakers on this question before me. It's interesting because I was raised in a Muslim household where we have some very set traditional roles for the father and the mother. Certainly head of the father. We're also African, and so society-wise, that nothing really surprising about that. But our family did travel around a lot. Even my dad, before he met my mom, very young, traveling, and learned to be independent, cooking his own meals. So that's the way he raised us. That's the way that both my parents raised us. Whether we were boys or girls, and there were 4 of us at one point, we all learned to do all of the household chores, cooking, no defined traditional roles for girls, in other words, in that household. Now, since becoming a dad in the United States, and I think I have embraced, just looking at how I've been moving about family business, I've embraced the more traditional roles of a dad being a provider of the household and being the first to weather any external threats, if you will, just being the first to sacrifice for the family where necessary. It's just, I've sort of just fallen into that role. I kind of feel it works best that way for me and my family. That's what I'll say about that.
Thank you so much. So since a lot you've all covered during this role of question, and who is much more a disciplinarian in your family, your dad or your mom? Just one answer. Dad, mom. Who are you more afraid of, or you think you could go to when you're going through something? Who would you approach, your mom or your dad?
I'll go with my mom. My dad was unapproachable.
Wow. Okay. Mr. Fakunda.
It was my mother.
Your mother. You rather talk to her?
Yes.
Yes. What about you, Mr. Kenny?
Yeah, it would have been mom as well.
Okay. Mr. Disu, who would you go?
My mom was the more approachable by far.
Okay. And Mr. Taiwo Adedikwe?
Yep, my mom was more approachable. Dad was a strict disciplinarian.
Okay, so we all recognize that. I believe most of us rather, approach our mom instead of the father. And I hope, that role changed since we came to this country. So, and I understand from your family background, the structure and your upbringing, what would you have preferred to change from your family background? What would you have preferred to change? Because I know there's so many people. I grew up in a polygamous family and living with other relatives. How does, and a lot of time it does have an impact in someone's life growing up. Just briefly, just tell me what in 1 or 2 sentences.
I wouldn't say, change, because I can't think of anything that I would change or I would trade from my childhood, and again, maybe because every child is the product of his or her environment. Mm-hmm. My father was a pastor, so my experiences growing up is going to be a lot different from actually a lot different from my wife's experience growing up. You know, my father was a pastor. We moved from village to towns, to village to towns. And my wife is different. You know, I married up. Let's put it that way. Okay. So my experiences are different from mine. And so would I have modified something a little bit? I wish I could have, you know, if it was possible for my father not to be transferred every 3 years to go, but I couldn't change that. So it was the nature of the beast. That's the work he signed up for. So if there's anything I could have changed, made between when I was born and the age 11 when I went to a boarding school, that is probably what I would have loved to change.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to?
It's a bit of a tough one, isn't it? Because I think it's all down to environment and the information you're exposed to. So our parents and grandparents acted based on the knowledge and the environment they were in. So, I mean, we had to cut them some slack. But in my case, I guess really just working based on like how I'm raising my kids now is I wish my dad would have been a bit more hands-on in like raising us in terms of like the school activities that was usually left to mom to just do. Because I look at myself like when I take my son to nursery, it gives you a chance to have a chat with the teacher, find out how things are going on with him at school, and then can pick up those things at home as well. But like I said, it's down to the environment and the knowledge at the time. So
Thank you.
That'll be it for me.
Thank you. Mr.
Sambaza, yes. I think it's the same thing everyone has said, Mr. Babatunde and Mr. Kenny, with regard to what you can change. Like I like the part where you said hands-on. We are more hands-on than our parents were, especially my dad. Even though still, like you guys said, we may have changed, but it's still the same thing. My son would talk to my wife before he comes to talk to me. So with my daughter on some things, and if they do something wrong, all my wife needs to say is, "Let me talk to your dad, and we'll see what happens." And they'll quickly do what they're supposed to do. And being hands-on is actually something that I would have liked to, because I participate in their sports, and I coach them. When they go to swim, I'm with them, so I'm always around them, to the point where sometimes I'm like, gosh, I wish my parents just could have come to watch at least one soccer game or just one rugby game, or just be there for a sport and say, hey, you know what, I'm here for you. But considering that I was in a boarding school and they were far away, there you go. I have to cut them some slack. But that was maybe one of the only things that I may have felt that could have been changed. But it was what it was. And well, maybe that's the reason why I'm more hands-on on this other side with my kids. Yeah.
Mr. Disu or Mr. Taiwo?
So I wouldn't really change anything. But I'll say maybe I wish my dad, had more conversations with us instead of going straight to corporal punishments, growing up. The corporal punishment did help, and mostly it was, when I didn't do too great, in school. He was like, "Oh, your friends that, were first place, do they have two heads?" And then, we would get spanked, and then that would make you sit up the next academic year. You try being the best. It helped, but it was more out of fear. But I wish he had, had some words of affirmation, and, done more of conversation instead of, going straight to discipline. But it did help. At least it achieved the same goal, but I wish it was the other way around.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Disu, you have any briefly?
Yes, I think if I had the power to change the attitudes of my parents while growing up, I would have wished that my father was more accepting of the need to give my mom more decision-making power in the household, especially as and when she was contributing more to the family finances. My dad, that was one area I think that lack of movement on my dad's part, I think really affected the long-term ability of the family to just be together over the longer run. So, and I've learned from that personally in my own relationship with my wife. I don't want to make that sort of mistake, especially being that we are outside living in parts of the world where male's traditional role is not what it is back at home in Ghana. So that's one thing I would have changed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So
can I interject something here?
Yeah.
I think for all what we've been going through, and somebody told me this a couple of weeks ago, it said, the reason why our fathers were the way they were is when you came up with the issue, we think more solution-based, not to hear, to understand and then say, have compassion. It's like, okay, I'm having this issue at school. First thing a dad would think of is, what can we do to resolve this, right? So you're thinking about, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, 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 finish, right? But if it's going to a mother, your mother will be like, oh, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. These things will happen like this. So you want to go through that instead of being told, hey, this is what I would like you to do. Or you're told, this is because you did not do this, because this, it's like you're on the receiving end. Yeah. To make sure that you needed to know what to do, solve the problem, not understand the problem so that next time, you can figure it out differently.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So I want to jump into migration now. Before you migrated or immediately after you migrated to the United States, what was your view of your impression of what fatherhood may look like in United States or in Europe? You understand?
Well, I
go
think
first.
I do, but when I came to the United States, I did not have marriage in mind. So the issue of fatherhood was not even on my mind. Because I came for graduate studies, and so. But I knew that one day I'll be a father, But as time went on, and then I got married, then I started thinking about, what kind of father am I going to be? What kind of family am I going to build? Where and how? So to answer your question, initially it didn't. It wasn't really on my mind. I was in engineering school. And by the way, someone said he lives in Oklahoma, right? Did I hear that right? Yeah, I went to Oklahoma State. I hope you didn't go to OU, Edmond. Okay? Because I hold it against you.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Kenny, you have anything to say regarding your view of parenting in Western world?
Yeah, I didn't have much of an expectation because in Nigeria, a lot of our cultural influences came from America because a lot of the foreign TV was more American-based. So coming to the UK was quite different. It was a culture shock from things like when you're expecting a baby, how they include the fathers in everything from antenatal class to making decision on the birthing process and everything. So it was all new to me in a nice way because from the beginning, they channel you to be hands-on on everything and they encourage you to be there during the birth and everything. So I would say for me, I didn't have much of an expectation, but when I came here and I went through the process, it was quite a nice process, if I can say so.
Wow. What about you, Mr. Jisoo? And
I'm not sure I have anything really to add more on that. I also came in as a college student, international student visa to the United States. And so I was a little too young to be thinking of fatherhood. But if I can give you a clue, I did have some, I would think, relatively traditional notions of what my romantic life would be like. I expected to marry the first person I was intimately involved with. That's how I came to the United States.
That's great. So, Mr. Adedipe, you have anything to say to that? Unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, coming to the United States, that year was when we got married. I had not really thought that far into, what fatherhood would look like, but I don't think being in the United States, my view of fatherhood has really changed compared to what I knew or experienced, with my dad growing up. My parents were always hands-on involved in everything we did, especially my dad too. So yeah, nothing really changed.
Yeah. So do you also play a role change? Because I know many of you mentioned it during the conversation regarding, doing the household chores and many things that you are not really familiar with back in, your respective countries, whereby you have to do the chores as a husband, a father, some of the roles that you were not really familiar with. Mr. Kenny, would you like to talk more about that? I know you have a special child with special need.
Yeah. That, and also the fact that here in the UK, childcare is expensive. So if you were to hire the services of a nanny, that's one of your wages. So it's either you or your spouse wages will definitely go into employing the services of a nanny or additional childcare. So really, to make things easier for both of you, you just have to pick up the slack. So yeah, it's been a case of just being hands-on with everything. So like I said, it was quite interesting going through that antenatal process and everything. So got really clued on how all those things work, like changing, bathing and everything, because yeah, you have to do it together. Even when we had our mother-in-laws come in, they could only stay for a limited period of time. So ultimately, you need to pick up the slack. And also in our case where our first child, our daughter has additional needs, it also means with hospital appointments and everything, you have to get involved. So we can go to the appointments at the same time. So we have to share the knowledge. We have to work with different medical practitioners. So I say working together just makes it easier for the two of you. Make sure one person doesn't burn out, and just that emotional support between the two of you. So yeah, it's just a case of when you get these situations in your family life, you just have to adapt and pick up the pace.
Yeah. So in Europe, do they offer services such as respite care?
Yes, we start getting all of that now. So respite care, we get a few hours a week where somebody comes to help out with our daughter as well. So yeah, that's also handy to have.
And would you like to share a little bit of the challenges as a parent that you face?
Yeah, sure. So my daughter was born with a genetic condition, which has meant she has global developmental delay. So she's 8 years old, but doesn't typically do things that an 8-year-old would do. So she's dependent on us because she's tube fed and has limited mobility. So yeah, we have to pick up all those things like making sure she has a feed regularly. When she's going out on a wheelchair, she gets the assistance as well. Like you said, here in the UK, we've got respite care. So based on our needs, there's a panel that meets and then gives us specific number of hours to use for things like physio or hospital appointments and things like that. So Yeah, that's how it typically works here. We are fortunate to be in this country where the healthcare is free. We get it within the NHS. If we were across the pond, it would have set us back a lot financially. But yeah, we just take it each day at a time.
Yeah, I love the healthcare in Europe anyway, in London, in England, compared to what we have in America. Because even though it's kind of free, but then you have to battle with the insurance company all the time. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really feel for you, and you're doing a great job, because I've heard so much positive things from Mo when she referred, mentioned you that you're going to be part of this. So for everybody, what would you say in general are the systematic barrier or difficulties African immigrants experience in their new country, such as adjusting to social or cultural changes? I know there's so many of our members of our community that they have language barrier or untransferable professional skill or educational experience, or we also talk about lack of extended family as a support system for us, or declining your even self-image. People may look at you and say, because you are from Africa, the image that they have for that society, that continent, it is so negative, and now that reflects on us. So what would you say are some of the general systematic barriers that you experience?
I think, if I may go up, there's something which we have really missed out. Sami Disu just said something and it echoed to me. Remember, he said, when you come here, the first thing you get married to the first person you're romantically connected with, right? And that's not so. Same thing we have in East Africa. Now, that already starts shaping you as a man and how you're going to live in this country, because at that point, you realize what is called dating. We are from the culture where, yes, I see it like a dove. You see that woman, you like her, we go with it. Whatever goes down the lane, I don't know, but we're going with her. So that is one of the first few things that changes you as a man from Africa, to be able to navigate in a society where you start by looking yourself as, okay, I can go out with several women. Your mind starts changing as to what kind of a man you are. And I think that's one angle we shouldn't forget to touch on. It's very, very important, because it's what will entail to say, are you going to get married? Somebody Nosa put it on the chat and said, hey, when am I going to get married? Yes, you have options now. Does that make you get ready for marriage, or does that confuse you? As an African, that could be also one way of looking at it as a barrier to why some of the African men are not quite willing to settle down, because you have all these options available to you. Unlike back at home, where I see that one and I'm good with it, So
thank you.
I'd say that's one of a barrier. Thank you, Disu, for bringing that up.
Thank you so much. So anybody wants to say in general the systematic barrier that we tend to face in this country as African men?
I wouldn't say barrier. I would say challenges in my case. And like I said, we are different, and we came here under different circumstances. Some came as immigrants. Some came as non-immigrants. Some came as refugees. And so depending on how you came, the challenges will be different. There are some commonalities in the challenges, okay? Because the culture is different. I mean, I don't, if you're from Africa, anywhere in Africa, at least West Africa, you come to the United States or you go to the UK, the UK is a little different, because most of us, the countries are colonies, so we are quite familiar with the British, system. That makes a little difference. I mean, for instance, boarding school I went to, majority of my teachers were British. We had maybe one or two Americans, British, Indians, Nigerians, and so on. So if you come here as a student, as I did, to graduate school, the challenge is, for me, my challenge was every class I took, I was the only black face in that class. That I couldn't find any black person. I went to Oklahoma State, and I give you an example. I was auditing a class, a 300 level class, as a graduate student. I wasn't taking it for credit. And as soon as I walked into the class, the professor came to me and said, "Are you sure you're not in the wrong class?"
Thank you.
And I said, "Doctor," I'm not going to mention his name. I said, "Doctor, is this," I gave him the call number. "Is this class so?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "No, I'm not in the wrong class." Okay. Then, after the class was over, I said, "Dr. So, can I talk to you for a second?" He was shocked. And I told him, "By the way, I am not taking this class for credit. I'm auditing this class because I didn't take this class in undergrad, and I needed it for another class that I would take in the future." And I told him, "I'm actually a graduate student in electrical engineering."
Thank you so much for that, Doctor.
So those are the kinds of challenges that you face. Now, the challenges that I face when I start working as an engineer is different, know? Yeah. And as you start to rise up the ladder and people see you, the challenges also multiply.
Yes.
Especially from fellow Black people. Okay. It could come from anybody. So that's what I'm trying to say. It depends on how you came here, when you came here, why you came here, and as you stay here and for a longer period of time, and the challenges we face when we start having children is also different. Okay. Yes. So it depends on which area of of your life in the United States you want to look at.
Thank you so much.
It's very interesting because I assume some of you guys will be able to relate to what I'm saying, depending on where you fit in. Did you come here as an immigrant? Did you come as a student? Did you come as some people came here because they studied in the UK or in Nigeria and they got a job. So they're coming here as a professional. But then you come here and you say, "Well, I was a professor in Nigeria." It's a little different here. You know what I'm saying? So it depends on, your situation.
Yeah, it's part of what
I took too long.
Thank you. It's part of what I explained before. So, because we have to look at, some of all these different situations, that systematic barriers and challenges that many African immigrants face. Many immigrants also face the same. Because like I always say, you are not just, as an immigrant, you're not just facing systematic discrimination, barrier. You also face discrimination from other minority group as well. So we have to be open, talk openly about that. The challenges that we face from other people of color as well, because as an African, we're seen as being different, So as a Black person, you from Africa, you also have to face other Black people who look down on you, who does not think you fit into their group, or you are not Black enough, So it's a lot of all those things that we tend to go through. So I just want, if anybody has any other things to contribute to that before I go into, I know the time is going so fast, and I want to go into deeper conversation into household, fatherhood within your household. Anybody has anything different to contribute to that regarding the systematic barrier or difficulties or challenges?
I think I'll just put it this way, with what Mr. Babatunde said. With the family culture, the way we are, this is also the start of everything. As I see we're going towards the family now. We've come as a single people. We're trying to get together. You're trying to find your way in this society. You're trying to figure out which way do the people accept you. Who's going to accept you? Who's not going to accept you? How do you deal with, first of all, your employers, your people around you, as opposed to how you are taught, by your parents or by your father. Remember, you are a father figure who's going to have to teach your child who's going to be born, or when you get a family, this is how you're going to teach them of your experiences. How was your experience? If you had a bad experience in the beginning, I think that will kind of fall in, depending on who you are. It's not a whatever blanket statement for everyone, but it's like that will shape you up to be who or what you're going to tell your kids. At some point you might say, you know what, I'm not staying in America. I'll have my kids here just because I need to give them the one up, and then after that I'm going back home. Or you'll just say, hey, you know what, I'm just packing up and going straight up, because of what you experienced beginning and how you tried to maneuver yourself. Some make it, some don't. Yeah. So that's what I had to contribute to that statement.
I know there's this question before I go into the family, and we've been talking about it. How many of you African men have African American friends that you say you're close with? Or
I don't have a choice, but my wife is, so family, and so it just flows in.
Yeah, Mr. Fapo understood it does. Mr. Disu, I know he may have some few African American friends. In England, I know they have Jamaicans and all these people from the island. So it might also be friends. So now let's go into the fatherhood within the household. I know as a father, is a sense of a pride, joy, responsibility, and commitment to the family, which was already said here. And I want to bring Mr. Taiwo into this conversation. I hope he's there to answer, because I see that he's mute. I hope, he's on to answer this question. So I'm not sure whether, Mr. Taiwo, you and your wife, you adopted a sunshine in your household that I tend to see all the time. She's so beautiful. I call her a sunshine. And you and your wife couldn't, have your own child biologically for a reason that may not be of your fault or any other reason. So you both became a parents through adoption. Would you like to briefly talk about your family journey through this process? Just briefly, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay, yes, we do have a lovely 4-year-old going on 40. Yeah, we had some challenges along the way after getting married, and I always knew my wife had that desire to be a mother, and I knew she'd be a great one at it. She also told me, even before we got married, that she always wanted to adopt a child. So I held that at the back of my mind, even before we got married. And, what better time to get this done than, when we did it. I'm glad we did. And she's brought a lot of joy to our family. So my wife, she's growing up quickly. And, it's been a good time, great experience, having to be a dad and her just bringing joy to our home. I know initially before we finalized, adopting her, there were some issues because of where we reside in Oklahoma, and she looks more white than black, even though she's mixed. So I had to struggle through that initially, having to deal with the head turning and, looking at, is that his daughter? things like that, people, just wondering, oh, did they take this child from somewhere, or, just dealing with all that. But at the point I was like, after she lived with us for a while, after we fostered her, she was naturally a part of our family. So I couldn't just think of any other, way than to just make it formal and permanent.
Thank you so much. So I want to further ask you a question. Knowing that within African society, most of the issue when it comes to fertility and childbirth, someone in your profession as a medical doctor, and knowing that society tends to push, they have so much power into what, how people decide their life, especially for a man, telling the man, listen, you have to have a child, you have to do this, you have to do that. Did you experience any kind of form of pushback from the community or the loved one, both in Nigeria and abroad?
You mean pushback on the adoption?
Yeah, in terms of the adoption, or making sure that you have to have your own biological child. In terms of them actually, blaming you, telling you that, listen, this is not, this is what they believe you have to do. Because in our community, we experience that a lot. I've seen so many stories. I've seen so many marriages that break through that, through influence of other people within the community. Those who are not part of the family tend to come in, and they break part. The family. They want to have a much more power, a much more contribution, a much more dictate what has to take place.
Yeah, and especially, me being the last born, but, my family respects me, right? Maybe by virtue of my profession, I don't know. But no one ever gave me any pushback, as regards adoption of our daughter. They were all very supportive. We carried them along, even before we adopted her and all that. So, and they even got to meet her. She went to Nigeria with us, spent time, met my dad before he passed and all that. So, yeah. And, of course, one or two siblings, would like, hey, hey, are you going to try it? Have your own, things like that, but that's all they can do, right? Nobody's going to dictate or tell me how to live my life.
Yes. And I'm glad that, I'm so happy that you hold on to your beliefs. So I just want to ask you one more question. What word of wisdom would you like to share with a couple or a person who may be thinking of adoption, especially among African immigrant community or even back home, because it's not something that is common within our community or even back home within the continent itself?
Right. So personally speaking, and I remember when myself and my wife first started this, we started first as foster parents. So we fostered her for a while. And like I said earlier, we grew, we loved her from the first moment, right? But, that love continued to grow. So it just seemed natural for us to make it formal, right? For us to adopt her. But your question was, what advice do we have?
Yeah.
Or do I have for people on adoption? Yeah. So before I got around to even accepting to do this, I had to really sit down and think through it a lot, because the average mindset of the typical Nigerian or maybe African man would be, why would you adopt someone else's daughter, blah, 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 why not have your own, all that stuff. But again, a child, she calls me dad. I'm her dad. You're a father, not necessarily by biologically birthing someone. You're a father by raising the child in the way that the child should be raised based on your values and your morals and all that. So I got to learn that, through the process. And it wasn't something that I just decided on. And I think what also helped was, I knew at the back of my mind, my wife had always told me that she always had that desire, and I thought what better way to, gift her that, by just having her become ours permanently.
Yes,
so
thank you so much for that. Thank you. I know it's very
touchy. And I had one last thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, something that you have to be really selfless about. You have to, get through, that mindset of, oh, why would I be taking care of someone else's child? Blah, blah, blah. You have to be selfless and, just see it as a ministry to helping raise a child when the biological parents cannot have the opportunity to do that.
Okay, I wanted to jump in on this one and have a question, and this will go to the men in this. And Taiwo, that's actually regarding you in that situation and discussion. Does this issue of the fact that we are away from the country, I mean, between you and Nigeria and me and Kenya, so many miles away, they have to make that phone call to be able to call you and get you. Does that give you some type of buffer to be able to continue to what you're doing? Because I think if you were in that setting, in an African setting, where in the morning you wake up and the whole rest of the family is there and you're in constant, community, there's that idea of, kind of pressure that'll get you going with regard to the decision that you'll make in terms of adoption. I don't know if I'm putting this right. To all the men out there, do you think, maybe you can expound on it on your own thoughts, but being out here, it's kind of, it gives you some leeway or something like that.
Yeah. So Sambaza, if you want me, I get what you're saying, and I can take a moment to translate it really quickly.
Yes, please.
If you don't mind. so I think basically what Brother Sambaza is saying is that does the immigration from your previous country to your current land, does the distance from your cultural experiences and exposure, does that create a little bit more freedom and autonomy to be able to do these practices that might be considered taboo if we were presently in the native homeland? So does the immigration experience and exposure to a new land in your resettled country, does that create some type of a buffer or a safety net that allows you to be able to do what you've discussed already? I hope I captured that right for you, brother.
Yeah. Well, maybe it just added a little bit of a buffer. Maybe I'm the kind of person that if I am determined to do something, I do it. I listen to people. I tend to analyze the situation and stuff like that, but if I'm bent on doing something and I decide to do something, I get it done. But yeah, maybe not being physically in Nigeria and being, thousands of miles away, might have helped. But I really don't see how it would have really changed, what I would have done still. You can adopt in Nigeria as well. They have lots of motherless babies homes and stuff like that. That's what they call them there. So I don't think it would have changed anything, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. We're almost, because I have plenty of questions, but, I just want to ask you the last question in terms of your, as a father in this country, in the Western world, whether you are in Europe or you are in America, I know many of us grew up in a home where we're raised with values such as honesty, integrity, religious and cultural value, respect for the elders and others, and educational, education is one of the most important, especially, coming from Africa and, coming to this country, everybody push for their children to go to school to do everything that they need to do. And in many African immigrant homes, parents tend to say what they want their children to do. But then sometimes we model a behavior that is completely different from what we are saying to our children. And a lot of times they tend to watch what we are doing. Are we actually conscious of all those? If anybody wants to answer that. Because, being a parent, we also have to model certain behavior. If I'm looking for integrity, I'm looking for values, I'm looking for respect, because one thing I see with American children, not like, we grew up back home, there's a certain way that we have to adjust ourselves, such as learning to listen, learning to understand that we cannot have our opinion made all the time, in terms of understanding what their struggle is all about. I remember I've said this many times. My children actually taught me how to listen. Yeah. Because, in terms of they have something to say, many times I just have to be quiet. And I cannot, my daughter has to tell me sometimes ago that anytime I'm asking you for something, you use yourself as an advice. You talk about your own experience. That is not what I'm asking you, what I'm talking about. I want you to listen to what I'm saying now and reflect on the conversation, not use yourself as an example. Because the conversation, they tend to change around and we become the main focus of the conversation. So have we, as fathers, especially because I know many of our children talk about not being able to be approachable towards their fathers because everything is about giving rules and telling you what to do. I'm done with you and that's it. So if the example might not be from your home, but what advice would you give to those kind of fathers, those kind of parents, with those kind of ways of parenting?
I like to take this first. When I was growing up, when I was a teenager, even up till 1980 when I came to the United States, my first maybe 15 years, I had no television. There was no running water. There was no telephone. We didn't have a telephone. And we didn't, there is nothing I didn't do. Someone was talking about changing diapers. I was changing diapers at age 13, 14. I was changing my nephew's diaper at age 13 and 14 because my mother made me do it. She taught me how to do it. And so one thing that I had to do, or we had to do as parents growing up and having children, is the fact that we had to adjust. Because if we're looking at what we did and didn't do when we were 13, 14, and 15 in the 60s or 70s, and now you have a child who is 13 in the 24th century, it's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, the challenges, the peer pressure, the environment, everything is different. And so as parents, we have to be able to recognize the fact that we have to change, but at the same time, make sure that our values, our tradition, our culture is not totally compromised. There is the good America and there is the bad America. Just like people say there is evil in everyone and there is goodness in everyone. It depends on which one you feed at any point in time. Yeah. So our ability to filter out the noise, okay, and then take what's good about this culture and weave it into our own culture to make sure that while we're raising our kids to live in this environment, we're still, they still know who they are. That is the most important thing. Do they know who they are?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And that starts, and I'm going to land now. And that starts, for me, may not be the same for you, is the name you give to your children. It's very important. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that's how you name them and letting them know the meaning and why you name them the way you name them. I think that is the start,
yes,
for them to know who they are. Because if they don't know who they are, then they will spend the rest of their life trying to be who they're not. And that could be very dangerous.
Thank you.
Auntie Kemi, really quickly before, I just want to interrupt really quickly by just acknowledging the fact that I think one of our invited panelists, Mr. Mamadou Sawane, just joined as well. And so he has his hand up. I think he was going to be one of the fathers contributing, if I'm correct. So, Mr. Mamadou, I don't know if you have something you want to share really quickly before we get into our Q&A, but I want to open it up to you really quickly to share a few words before we get into our open forum.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for that. And I apologize for coming late. The soccer games I just finished. So I want to look at that area that he was just talking about. The relationship between generations, I call them. A few years ago, I used to have on that intergenerational dialogue where we look into what are the gaps between parents and the children. There is a gap because we came from Africa with a different mindset in the way of bringing up. So here we want to install this in our kids, and they are also struggling, facing the challenges within the communities and the societies. So how do we, drive this to a point that we can have a mutual relationship that will, breed love, understanding, and also accomplishment of goals. So this has been a challenge in our African community, to a point that we tend to fall in victimized by the influence of our streets. So for that being the case, I think when a child expresses to you, "Daddy, you don't understand me," look at things in his or her perspective and try to position yourself. So you can say, "Yes, I understand where you're coming from, but listen, this is the way I think this should be done." For example, my kids used to use another curse word in the house. In the beginning, I told them this is definitely against our culture. It is against our religion. Just because you pick up these things from the street or from school, not okay. I struggled, but finally, I haven't been hearing any curse words in the house. If they use it, it has to be among themselves and among their friends outside. So this is what you talk about every issue. You have, as a parent, you have to, you put yourself in a position where, you have to sit down, and then your kids don't have to be scared of you. And we are African fathers. We always tend to have this personality, and not all of us, but most of us, hey, when kids want to say something, you scare them. So that's why they go to their mothers. And I'm a victim of that. Before I knew this, I used to cane all my kids around the house, even if they block their exams. And I realized that, it scared the hell out of them. So what ended up happening was that I ended up sitting down and explaining to them the importance of passing your exams, the importance to study and become successful, instead of killing them all the time, because I get annoyed when I see them failing with all the tips that I given to them in America here in the Western world. Imagine me being struggling in Africa in the farms and so forth. I could get better. I was doing better compared to what they're doing at the level. So all these things we have to adjust. And I learned, later on when I started to adjust, my kids started to perform and they started to perform better. They would say, "Daddy, I don't want to. Daddy, I think I want to write a picture, so I have to study hard, tired of failing." These are some of the examples I can give, just to make sure that we close this gap and allow our kids to be comfortable, at the same time understand this. We came from a different background, even though they are kids. The society here has shaped them in a way that we have to face these challenges and make sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mr. Momodu. I really appreciate your contribution. I wish you would have been here earlier, but I understand you have a lot to do today. So right now, what we're going to do is to turn it over to question and answer. And I'm going to pass it to Miss Mo Sibyl of Mo Sibyl Podcast. So she's going to take over. I really appreciate this. Is so much worth of knowledge that was shared today. And I think this is really powerful. It's recorded. We're going to post it on our podcast. And, we take it from there. Thank you so much.
So can you all hear me? Yeah, I just want to say also echo what Mrs. Seriki just said about all the panelists. I've learned a lot and just sitting in the moment and hearing about the diverse experiences. So now we'll open it for Q&A. We have taken some already from the chat. So this is your time to either unmute yourself, ask questions. You can also raise your hand and I'll get to you right away. So let's use this time to ask any of our panelists questions you might have about, Mr. Fatbonda, you had your hand raised. Did you have a question?
No, not at all.
Oh, that's Mrs. Fatbonda. Sorry. Mrs. Fatbonda, I think. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This is just enlightening and just beautiful to be among fathers, African fathers, who are able to share their experiences. And no matter how many years you've been a father or a mother, you just keep on learning from people before you and after you. So my question is, because I have adult children and one of my child is married with two grandchildren, is married and has two sons, so I have two grandchildren. But then I have a daughter who's the younger of my children. We all, it's beautiful to have a very strong father, a role model, because that's the first exposure of a daughter of who a real, like a man is, what a man should be. And many of our daughters, they've been exposed to good fathers. So because of that, the standard, the expectation is usually high because of their upbringing, what is expected of a man. And as they grow older and they get into that space of, choosing a spouse, it's a good thing because they know what they want. They know what a good man is. But on the other hand, what I've seen over the years is that many of our young ladies, as they begin to get to that space of choosing a spouse, it's very, very challenging for them, extremely challenging, because what they've grown up to be a good man, it's very limited out there for them. And then sometimes you see, what's the delay? Can't you find a good man or all that? And what I've been able to pick up from many of the young ladies, including my daughter and other young family members, daughters and all the cousins and nieces, is that we can decide to get married, within a year because there's men out there. But the quality of men is the issue. We just can't settle for just any man. So that's the issue that I'm beginning to see with our young women, because choosing partners that are similar to their fathers, because that's all they know. And so what do you guys think? I don't know, anybody can come in. How do you, as a father, prepare your daughter, and you prepare them, and you're preparing them to be women who knows what's good for them? But when they get to the real world, would they get someone like you? That's the question.
Thank you for that. And we appreciate that. Just in the interest of time, if you can help us keep your questions really short. So Mrs. Tapoda is asking about preparing our children for marriage, and especially for positioning themselves to get the right quality men once they're out of your protective abode as a parent. So any of our panelists that would like to chime in on this question, that would be very nice.
Before I go, I think I'd like Mr. Babatunde and Mamadou to go first, because I think they have older kids than I have, and I might say something.
So what did you say?
I say you all go first.
Okay, I think I have a 17-year-old, so I can go for this one. If you guys don't mind.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So my daughter, I have one daughter, so this is just me. She's the princess of the house, and I don't know. It's gonna be a problem whoever is gonna marry her, because this is something that I'm gonna be all in. So that being said, I started preparing her. First of all, she's really a great person when it comes to studies. She's an A student. When it comes to mannerism, so I didn't have to do much, and she looks up to me a lot in terms of our grades and stuff like that. So I know what I always discuss with her is that about men. I always reveal to her what the shortcoming of men that she has to watch out for, and this is not the shy issue. You sit down and watch dating episodes and stuff like that in TV. I sit down with her and tricks that men play, and then what are things that are out there to look at. Also, what is it that the woman, and so what I told my daughter is responsibility. A man has to be up to that responsibility, that task. You cannot have a man that is going to be dependent on you. Make sure that whoever you're relating with has something to offer. Just because the person looks cute, person is a smooth talker, that doesn't pay the bills. So also you have to look at somebody who gonna be as career oriented like you. So I usually have that, and I also position myself. Anything I'm doing, I look at my daughter, as a reference. If I do certain acts in the community, or if I'm accused of certain things, how is my daughter going to look at this? And perhaps what kind of example am I setting this to my daughter? Because I'm the person that she look up to, and then she want to emulate somebody like me. So she even told me that my first child will be named after. That's how much our relationship is. So I always watch out, and it kind of keep me on the right path, because even I want to go out and then kind of do some other things, kind of think twice. I have a daughter that is gonna really I don't want to let down. So if you have that as a parent in the back of your mind, you would definitely how to react to things, or how to do a thing. And I always tell my daughter that take your time in a relationship. Just don't go by your emotion, but look at the person that you are dating. What is their background? How good are they? How critical are they? How caring they are. That you have to look at, and we really at women and say we want this person. But at the end of the day, when somebody else comes, we want to go for that one too. So kind of things you have to observe. Take your time when you're in a relationship and have a good conversation with your partner to know what they really look for.
Thank you so much.
I have with Thank you.
Thank you. So basically, just modeling what that will look like before they go out there. I think that perfectly captures that. We have a question from Ms. Latifa Kabiru. If you can ask your questions quickly, and so that way we can wrap this up. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists for sharing about your experiences and being so open and candid. One of the questions that I would like to ask you all is, you all have talked about how your past experiences, whether it's your grandparents, your parents, friends, you all have talked about how it's kind of like informed how you are as a parent. I'm curious about what do you do to actively be open to changing your parenting strategies? Like, how are you checking? What systems do you have in place for checking in with yourself to make sure that you're being the kind of parent that you want to be? How are you open to receiving feedback and allowing yourself to be changed? So in a nutshell, what are you actively doing to be a better parent?
That's a very good one. So basically, what are you doing to be a better parent? Anyone wants to take this? Maybe Sambaza, so that way you can hear from him.
Okay. Thank you, Latifa. I think I try as much as possible to be accepting of change. I mean, that's one of the hardest things as a person, first of all, and then as a man. When you have to make these changes in life and realize that, hey, my kids are growing, I have to readjust to the way I'm thinking as opposed to what I know. Yes, at some point, I think my kids are reminding me, oh, yeah, this is what you used to do when you were young. This is not the kind of lifestyle that you have right now. So at some point, it throws me off and I still have to go back and say, you know what? I have to rethink what it is. Technology has changed. A lot has changed. So I have to go and kind of be open to a little bit of change. I know it's really hard, but I'm sorry. I try as much as possible. It's one of the hardest things to do as a man, on my perspective. I want to throw in this thing, one more thing to answer the previous question, if you'll allow me, Mo. When you talked about your daughters, how to raise your daughters, there are two things that I noticed about them. I'm going to rush through this. Two things that I've noted about some girls that I have talked to before. Number one of them said that the dad used to take them out to one of these expensive places. I mean, they would be taken out to dinner, and it was not going to be McDonald's or Burger King or something like that. It would be $100 type dinner, whereby, if the next man who's going to take her out will be like, look, you have to spend this much money. And the more, you talk about, the girl will keep talking about, oh, my dad takes me out to this. It kind of throws off a man, and they'll be like, okay, I want to do what the guy has done before, right? This is somebody who's told me this before. Another one said this. The dad did one weird thing. They always bought flowers every week. And this is not even her dad, it's her stepdad. Bought flowers every single week and gave them. It got to a point till the man, her boyfriend said, no, tell him to stop. I'm the one who's going to be buying you flowers every week in the house. Right? Now, let me give you my perspective. We used to buy Christmas trees, right? And we used to buy those plastic ones. My wife used to bicker, oh, my dad used to buy fresh ones every single year. Used to buy fresh ones every single year. 2 years down the line, we have been buying fresh Christmas trees since then. So I think there's some things that you would do as a dad to set some standards for your girl so that it puts her or separates her from everybody else and shows her that this is what you would expect of a man for her. And if she carries on that, then whoever comes in takes over from you and, makes her a better person. That's what you hope for. I think I'll land with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for responding to that. Someone asked in the chat, Sadone said, as African parents raised with high standard of education, either to become a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer, how will any of the fathers handle issues of your children or child becoming an artist, entertainer, or not so high standard degrees? Ooh, tables are being shaken today. Anyone's answer that? Maybe Mr. Fakonda.
Well, my son is in the financial business. His bachelor's degree is in sports management, and he also did a master's degree in sports leadership. And I am an engineer, okay? And my daughter had a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in international development. So I never told my kids what to be, but I kept telling them, be the best you can be. And before I finish answering this question, there are three things I want to say about the other question. The availability is very important as a father. You got to be available. And then the other thing is, do not miss the opportunity of a teaching moment. Because some situations will arise, you got to pay attention. And so you got to be able to say, okay, this is what happened, and use it as a teaching moment for your girls, regardless of their age, whether they're single or married and so on. There are things you see and you say, okay. And then the other thing I would say is, I tell them, you have to be able to identify an authentic human being. Your future husband must be authentic. You cannot find a replica of your father. It's not possible because no two people, unless you're identical twins, will be identical to your father. There are some things you have to, there should be some trade-off. You know, what is very important? Character is very important. And the person who will be there, you can actually simulate some scenarios so that you see how the guy you're dating and so on will react. You know, that is a way for you to identify the right person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. So,
Thank you.
That's, I don't want to take too much of your time, but that's my,
Thank you so much, Mr. Fakonda. Appreciate it. Abdullah Siisii, sorry if I'm butchering your name. You had your hand up, so just go ahead.
No, you're saying it right. I have got on AirPods and I'm driving. Let me know if my audio goes out.
Okay.
But the question that I have, and I want to gear my question towards some of our older dads, the well-experienced one, I'm assuming Baba Tunde and whoever else follows. So growing in America and just kind of watching my dad, I really never saw him break down, and it's hard to imagine that he's never had a reason to break down. And I know Baba Tunde mentioned, I think that was like one of his comments was just being like a strong dad and all of that. And obviously there's a lot of value in that. Now for I would say like our generation and the some of us who are more I guess a little bit more woke in a way, and we're a little bit more in tune with our feelings. How can because I am a dad, and I'm a newer dad. My kid is 2.5 years old, and I do have an infant. What can you tell some of us younger dads who want to be more in tune and open about like our emotions, and are more transparent than, you know, some of like our older dads who again, like, you never see them break down. How could you manage your emotions and leverage that, because there is value in being an open person while still leveraging the value of being like a strong dad in a way. So
Thank you so
the
much for
question
that.
that I want.
So the question is really about emotional availability and even vulnerability, especially from our men when it comes to showing that side to their children. So,
well, thank you. You mentioned my name, and I'm going to take a shot at this. There is one saying that my son and daughter, and even my wife, I say this a lot. The first casualty of emotions is reason. We as human beings have to be emotional, and we have to be vulnerable, because you will be vulnerable. When I'm talking about strength, I'm talking about strength and weakness. What I mean by that is God did not guarantee that everything will be okay from the day you were born until you die. So we as human beings would have to experience something that would make us, that would test who we are. And so being strong doesn't mean that you cannot be emotional about what's going on. I mean, if you go to your sons or daughters' game, you gotta get excited, you know, because in that situation, that is what you have to do. You're showing that the support. But what I'm trying to say is, when things aren't going well, okay, you as the head of the family, you can't break down. You cannot. You have to be strong. But that doesn't mean that you cannot show that, you know, you can cry. That's okay. You can cry. I've cried. I cry more than I smile sometimes because I get emotional. But the thing is, you are conveying something. You know, it doesn't mean you're weak. That's not what you're saying. What you're saying is, but at the same time, you don't want to be carried away by emotions so that you miss, you know, the right thing for you to do at any particular point in time, depending on the situation.
Thank you so much.
Does that make sense?
It does.
That make sense?
It does. Mr. Disu, I would like to hear your thoughts on this as well, the emotional bit. And lovely to see your daughter. She's so cute.
Thank you. I am father to a 5-year-old daughter, so I think in many ways I'm still trying to figure out the balance in being a strong figure, a symbol of strength for my kid, as well as showing vulnerability. And I think I would naturally fall in line with someone like Abdullahi Siisii, who has spent a long time living and growing up in the U.S. and who understands that, yes, it's important and perhaps even necessary in the foreign environment, living in the U.S. to be, it's okay to be vulnerable and allow for my child to learn about life and seeing how I deal with vulnerability in difficult situations. I won't take any more time. I think I'm going to naturally fall more in being more vulnerable than my father was in the household.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're gonna have a hot talk.
Let me just say something to Abdullahi. Siisii. Abdullahi, thank you so much for attending. I know I've always involved you in so many community conversations, and the next one is going to be you and Kelechi. as a new, young father who are raising your children in America and you grew up in this country. So you are the next one. Be ready for that.
No pressure, yeah. We're just going to have a hat stop. We've had yes.
Can I interject here for a little second?
Sure, Sambaza, go ahead.
There's a very important question that was posed here by someone, and I don't think that it's some topic that we can discuss today because it's really a tough one.
Which one?
The one that's, what do you expect of your child as a parent, especially an African parent, as being an immigrant? What do you expect them to be as a doctor, as a lawyer, as if they want to be an actor? I think that is a very, very tough subject that we should give it its own merit and talk about it as one subject for a day. I think we're not doing it justice when we just pass through it as just a question.
Thank you.
And with regard to being vulnerable, I think I'll go with Babatunde and Samidisu. We have to choose what we want to be vulnerable about. You, personally, I would say, being African, you're the man. You stand, and this is an African man, you stand to be the head of the household. You have to show some type of restraint to a point. I'm not saying that you don't cry. If it really is taking you hard, my advice, this is my opinion, I would go to a certain room and bust my eyes out. It's not that I don't want to show my kids that I am vulnerable. They will see the vulnerability in me. A child can tell that this man is vulnerable. To cry, yes, I'll show them. But you cannot, you choose which or what you are going to be vulnerable about. You, like Babatunde said, don't be taken away by emotions and just, cry. It doesn't make sense. So that's one point I wanted to put in there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if you still want to linger on after closing, you're more than welcome to stay behind, but we just want to honor our time. And thank you for all of the questions. Our podcast names, I've been putting them as a slideshow. If you'd like to be a part of our conversations, make sure you check us out on socials. And I'm going to put all of that again in the chat. I'm going to hand it over now to Nancy to close us up.
Hi, everyone. Again, we can all admit, this has been a very powerful conversation and a well-needed conversation. Thank you so much for joining. And just to highlight our panelists, thank you, Auntie Kemi, Kelechi, Mo. Thank you, guys. And it's a common theme from what I've just been listening. I'm a single parent. I've learned so much from all of you fathers that we continue, even though we are outside of our own countries, we are continuing to install our values and our cultures in our children. And there's so much to learn. Thank you for so much insight and inspiration. This conversation is going to continue on our platforms, as Mo mentioned. We have our names are right there in the slides. But yes, follow us. We are all podcasters, and our next conversation on this forum will continue with the fathers that are first generation in America. So to all of you fathers, happy Father's Day. And thank you so much for showing up for your children.